Hello, thank you for joining the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel. Today I'm talking with Dr. Sala about some rather exciting articles that have appeared on even mainstream media, and it's been trending on Twitter. You see it all over Facebook. It's regarding the Israeli spy, as they're calling him, who announced that the United States had signed an agreement with an extraterrestrial federation and that we had a joint base on Mars. Welcome, Michael. Dr. Sala, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Corey. I'm glad to be here, and it's really great with this breaking news from this Israeli scientist. I mean, he's really very senior, and for him to come out and share what he has been saying is a really confirmation about the sort of things you've been talking about for a few years now. And now we're getting it from a person that headed Israel's defense program for spy satellites for 30 years. So it's,
yeah, you being the researcher that you are, you dug into him and researched him, I'm sure. And can you kind of give us a little bit of a summary of why we should pay attention to this person?
Okay, all right. Well, he has a PhD in aeronautical engineering, and he was sponsored by Israel's defense forces. And he was put in charge of the Space Research Institute at Technion, which is a technical university in Israel. And that's the place where they actually run Israel's spy satellites. So this guy ran that for 30 years after having served in the Israeli Defense Forces for a number of years. So from 1981 up until it was about 30 years, 2010, when he retired, he ran this institute and the satellite program, which for Israel is really doing a lot of their espionage or their space surveillance. And because of that, that meant that he got to work closely with the National Reconnaissance Office and the CIA, because the CIA runs the National Reconnaissance Office in conjunction with the Pentagon. And so that means that the kind of programs that the NRO and the CIA have been doing for years in terms of space surveillance, they have cooperated with Israel. And so this is the person who headed the Israeli side of the spy satellite system. He personally was in charge when 20 satellites went up. And so that's the cover. I mean, that's really the sort of thing that Israel's defense forces and the Mossad does to kind of like give them information about real world intelligence in the Middle East. But what he's just revealed through these interviews, which are part of a book that's just come out, is actually that it was much more than just satellites up there, that they were working with the Americans, and that there was, the joint extraterrestrial agreements. So big news, So, that's where I wanted to kind of get your feedback on what you know about the NRO being involved in this kind of like liaison with extraterrestrials on behalf of the US government.
Yeah, the NRO and is it the DIA, I believe, had assets that are very, are similar to what this person's describing. And them talking about the Federation, we have to remember, I had talked earlier about this Galactic Super Federation. And this Super Federation was kind of like a ruling body or a place where people came together to, present their experiments, the progress of their experiments, see the progress of others, and to it's kind of governing body. And there are other small federations that are made up of different groups that are allied that are coming together in the Super Federation. So it sounds very much to me like the genetic farmer races that I had described, that basically the deep state or the super shadow government had made deals like I had described with some of these extraterrestrial groups that were here supposedly monitoring us, but also tinkering with our genetics. And let's say someone signed a deal in the 1940s. Like I've described before, these ETs have the ability to travel in time as easily as they travel in space. So if they just happen to show up here in, let's say, 1940, and it was the first time they'd been in our system, they could conceivably then travel all the way back in time and start tinkering with our timeline and genetics, and they could actually be our ancient aliens. It's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. Time is something that they can jump around in and play with very easily. So what's happening is not only a galactic type of thing, it's a temporal occurrence as well.
Right. So that's one of the things that is important is what he's talking about when he mentions the Galactic Federation. Is he talking about this group of extraterrestrials that have made these agreements with the deep state and doing all these kinds of genetic experiments, and that they are kind of like, as you said, genetic farmers? Or is he talking about something much, a different group? I mean, maybe you can kind of elaborate between, what he's talking about, this Galactic Federation making agreements with the US, the deep state, for genetic engineering and kind of like overseeing our planet, with the human-looking extraterrestrials that most people associate as the good guys, like they call them the Galactic Confederation, or the even the Sphere Being Alliance. Because I remember at one point you talked about the Sphere Being Alliance being part of a galactic federation or confederation. So maybe, are we talking about different alliance groups here?
Yeah, many different groups. And you hear Galactic Federation a lot. Well, that could apply to many different groups, like the Sphere Being Alliance. They're a part of this. It's like they're like a galactic watcher kind of group that are overwatching higher density realms, and also looking after the lower density realms to make sure everything's being done according to cosmic law. And then we have lower level, these are like 6th, 7th density beings, very evolved beings. And then you go down to 4th and 5th density beings, and those include anything from the reptilians to these tall Nordic races, different types of beings that we lump into what we call the grades. There's a whole assortment of these other types of beings that, and insectoids are extremely into genetics. That's all of their technology is just genetic manipulation, even the ships they fly in. So, and they're a part of these little federations together, along with, they work with the reptilians sometimes, and then they have, agreements of convenience as well, because some of them have genetic, spiritual timeline agendas that conflict with other people in the super federation. And they sabotage each other's experiments at times. That's one of the reasons that they have this super federation, is to help manage that and prevent chaos in all of these different systems. Because if chaos occurs, no one wins, because the objective is ascension or evolution, and on a genetic level and also a consciousness level.
Okay, so the super federation of these human-looking groups that you went to, that was part of your job description, and more recently you said that you also went up there as that super federation was reconstituted. That's that's kind of like a superior body or a separate body to this Galactic Federation that Professor Eshed's talking about, that he was knowledgeable on.
I believe so, because the Super Federation is more of like a governing body where they all come together like in a big Congress type of situation, and then they kind of act like their own little states and with their own agendas while not attending the meeting, but they have agreements that they come together and enforce instead of having open warfare in the skies, ships coming in, destroying small civilizations to destroy their genetic lineage so theirs will prosper, or spreading diseases, all of that type of thing. They try to manage that in a way that's going to benefit all of the different groups. And eventually, the group being worked on is supposed to take over, like we are supposed to be doing. Humanity is supposed to be taking over our own experiment. And as I reported, years ago, at one of the last meetings I went to, the ET Federation had basically been told they're disbanding, and that humanity was taking over their own evolution as far as genetics and consciousness, religion, consciousness, all of that. It wasn't going to be manipulated by outside forces anymore for the first time. So we're going through the process of having that fully handed over to us. So I think that we're getting to a point to where they're going to be willing to share their existence, the ETs that we're talking about, openly, pretty soon. But they definitely want to acclimate us and don't want it to happen on our timetable.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty consistent with what Professor Eshed said, that the Galactic Federation are looking at revealing themselves, and that we haven't quite reached the point yet of being ready for them. So do you think this is all consistent with what you learned about, the kind of like reconstituting of the Super Federation that you knew of, and now humanity is in charge? Are we talking about the same process, or are these parallel processes?
It sounds like the same process and, in a way, parallel processes. He mentions that humans are working with some of these extraterrestrials on bases on Mars. But we know that we have bases that ETs have built that they are sharing with humans on the Moon and Mars, and other places up to a smaller degree, but these are pretty significant bases. So the fact that a mainstream person like the one we're talking about would talk about humans and ETs sharing a base on Mars, that just opens up the conversation for the public on all of the information you and I have been sharing the last 5 or more years.
Exactly, yes. I mean, he actually did say American astronauts are up there working with extraterrestrials. So that's really acknowledging that there's a secret space program with bases on Mars, and that this secret space program is conducting joint experiments with extraterrestrials. Mars is one of the places where this is all being done, and that he was privy to this knowledge in his official capacity. And that matches with my ongoing research showing how the NRO and the CIA, along with the NSA, have been part of this kind of like deep state organized secret space program. And I think he would know about that because he was handling the Israeli side of it, because the Mossad and Israel's Defense Force and their Space Institute handling their spy satellites, all of that was all part of this kind of overall coordination between the Israelis and the Americans for not only conducting spy or espionage over the Middle East, but also monitoring deep state traffic and obviously keeping up to speed with what the extraterrestrials are doing.
Yes, and I believe this is all a part of an acclimation process. We've had, Fox News and other media showing the Tic Tac UFO, talking about some of the programs that we had to investigate extraterrestrials, and covered it in a serious way. Now we have, a fairly high-ranking, credible person from one of our allied countries that is making even larger statements that's going to open up the conversation. Because how many people in the mainstream saw that, and after they chuckled a little bit, saw the news article, they went through and they read it and they started highlighting Galactic Federation and Googling it, and then all of these other little keywords, and then they're finding their way to our work, our community, to where we're releasing this information. This has gone somewhat viral, and it's really an opportunity it's an opportunity for the powers that be to start seeding our consciousness, but it's an opportunity for us to jump in on the PR around it and show everybody that there's a lot more information to be found.
Right. So, one of the questions I think a lot of people have is this genuinely part of the disclosure process, of the awakening process, or is this a distraction to kind of like get people's attention away from, the political turmoil in the US and how things are unraveling here?
I had been warning for years that right when we get to the point where we see that everything's about to be exposed about, the cabal, what's been going on the planet, that I expected a big announcement about Antarctica or ETs or the secret space program to occur. So because of the time we're in, it could be a distraction, but at the same time, it could also be just a part of this drip disclosure that they've been planning to release, information over a long period of time. You're starting to see news articles about, just talking about time travel. It's possible. They're seeding our consciousness with that, because when we learn about the technology that the secret space program or Space Force and other groups are using now, it becomes, there are too many temporal anomalies that occur when you're observing the operation of these craft for you not to need to have that programming. You need to have your mind expanded a little bit to understand that this time travel stuff is real and this is kind of how it works. And then, these craft that we release, you notice how they flutter from here to there and it looks like they're in two places at once. That has to do with some of the temporal effects that occur, and it'll sink in a lot easier to the mass consciousness.
Right. Okay. Well, because I know that's a concern some people have, that this is all a distraction, but I think it's really just also part of the awakening process. As the deep state loses control, as it has to play all its cards. This is one of the big cards it's been holding back for decades now, and now it's being played. And maybe part of the rationale is a distraction from the other stuff going on, but at the same time, I think we can take this as a kind of gift in a way to help awaken humanity to the big picture. Because I've always thought, as more and more people start to look to space and look for answers to a lot of questions, UFOs, what's happening on the other planets and so forth, secret space programs, that our consciousness is going to expand. It's just inevitable. When you start to think outside of our planetary sphere, consciousness expands. So that's a good thing, even if the deep state is trying to roll this out as part of a distraction. It's still a positive thing.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think another thing we need to watch is the entertainment industry. A lot of these disclosures or just prepping our mind is going to occur in movies, television shows, video games, to slowly kind of ease us into what they're about to reveal. So, I think what's going to come out in Hollywood in the next 5 years is it's going to be, really interesting to observe, because, we have galactic federations we're talking about in the news, time travel. The consciousness of humanity has been seeded already for more, and they can bring in a lot of interesting concepts through science fiction and other methods. So I think keeping our eyes on the media is going to help us kind of foresee what's about to come, because usually you can watch their moves, and a move they make like that will kind of give away their timing or what they're planning on doing next.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you about one of the things that Professor Eshed said that I thought was really interesting, and maybe you've talked about it in the past, but I didn't appreciate it at the time. But he said that the Galactic Federation was on the verge of revealing itself through the Trump administration, or that Trump was getting ready to reveal its existence. But then it said, no, hold on, humanity isn't quite there yet. Technologically, we aren't at that sufficient level. So it brings up this whole question of, type 1, type 2, type 3 civilizations, the Kardashev scale. As far as I know, the breakaway civilization with all the advanced tech is probably, type 1.1 or type 1.2, something like that. Whereas we, you're using open source scientific data, Michio Kaku said that we are at 0.7%. So we're not yet a type 1 civilization, globally yet. So the Galactic Federation said, well, we need to be closer to a type 1 civilization before they reveal themselves. Is that part of the normal process for extraterrestrials making open contact, that society has to be closer to a type 1 status?
Not that I've observed, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
If we were just one live news announcement away from being a type 1 civilization, they just have to reveal it to us. So the technology is there. We have the technology to go and visit these ETs at their home planet under our own volition. So I think more of what needs to catch up is the consciousness. And right now we're, in the United States, look, we're on the verge of an open civil war. There's been a shadow civil war for at least 4 years. Look in all of these different countries, there's turmoil everywhere. The ETs know that this is all a part of the buildup to the solar event, that as the cosmic energy and feedback from the sun through the cosmic web builds up, it begins to affect our consciousness, and everyone starts having end time madness, and having to, deal with their own BS. And it builds up and builds up until the sun has this micronova, and then it sort of resets, and everyone after that time are all connected in a way that we've never been really connected before. That, I believe, is more of the change that they are waiting for us to, that change they're waiting for us to make. We already have, the type 1 civilization technologies, and we are manufacturing them and actually trading them to other solar systems. So, I really think that, now maybe technologically we don't have an understanding of the correct laws of physics, the electroplasmic physics, the way the universe works and the way consciousness ties in, that is a technology, in a way. But as far as like a physical technology, as in, space travel, manipulating energy and matter, we have a lot of those abilities now.
Right. Okay. So then, from the perspective of extraterrestrials monitoring our planet, they look at our planet, and even though we have a breakaway civilization hoarding a lot of these advanced technologies, they're not going to say, well, that planet is like type 0.7 or something, or they're going to judge us from the advanced technologies that are being used, even if it's just by a small elite group ensconced in these classified programs. that the extraterrestrials will look at all of that and say, well, technologically, this planet is at a type 1 status already, just that most people on the planet's surface don't have access to those technologies because they are being hoarded by the deep state. So what Professor Eshed said, that the Galactic Federation is waiting for us to catch up, you think that's kind of like disinformation? Is that just a new agenda? Is he pushing an agenda?
I mean, that could be his understanding based on what they were saying in the programs, but I mean, but overall, it has to make you wonder, are these ETs the amoral ones that I had talked about, or are they, the angelic ones? Well, if they're waiting for us to, I mean, it just doesn't sound like they're interacting with us in a way of angelic beings. Now, a lot of these beings in these galactic federations, I'm not saying they're negative, but they're amoral. I mean, they're coming down kind of like a clinical, scientist doing a clinical study, and they're not getting, emotionally attached to us. They come in, they pick you up, give you an injection, check you out, make some notes, put you down, just like we would a lab rat. So they're not necessarily, but the lab rat, his perspective is, hey, this being's picking me up, jabbing me, holding me in this area against my will. It's not going to see this ET as being a positive being, but a lot of the ETs in this Galactic Federation that do all these genetic experiments, they see themselves as sort of like amoral scientists.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things he pointed out in his interview, that there are these experiments that are happening between the US and the extraterrestrials as part of these agreements. Now, the first, he didn't actually specify, what agreements or how many agreements there are and all of that. But as far as I know, the first agreement happened in 1955 at Holloman Air Force Base, where Eisenhower secretly met with representatives of, either it was the German Antarctic program or extraterrestrials, or a combination of the two. That's kind of like still not clear. But that's the first set of agreements that I know of. I mean,
well, yeah, there are definitely agreements prior to that. If you remember, my grandfather, who was during World War II, was a conscientious objector, went into this program to where they were giving them viruses and wartime, diseases, and then coming up with treatments. Well, I'm told that this experiment also entailed that the viruses they were giving them had little things that turned on and turned off genes in their body, and then affected their offspring, going down to my dad, then me. And so this was genetic manipulation before genes were ever really announced in, I think, the 50s. So how were they knowing how to edit your DNA using a virus in the 1940s? Well, it's because they were working with a Nordic group, and this Nordic group was working with them to, implement these genetic changes to help create assets to fight against the negative ETs that they considered negative. So this goes back, to the 40s, to the 30s. There have been, the United States, when it was founded, there was discussions. Some of the founding fathers discussed that, there were unearthly beings that were involved. I would say that there would have to have possibly, been an agreement even back that far.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really interesting, that the Nordics were helping the US with some of their genetic experiments in the 40s.
Well, the 20 and Back program came from the Nordic race. They came in and they told us, well, according the way the mechanics of your solar system work, there's like a 20-year kind of little bandwidth that you can use, to exploit, that you can exploit to create time temporal bubbles that you can bring people from all different times into and, work on problems. And they have done it in many different solar systems. And they've done it in many other solar systems, but in each solar system, it's a different time period. It might be a 10-year and back, or a 10-year loop that they're able to exploit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told it had to do with Saturn, something with Saturn in our solar system. Saturn was our Chronos planet.
Right. So the 20 and back program really began in the US with the Nordic races helping secretly, I guess, the Navy develop the Solar Warden program, whereas the reptilians helping the Germans in Nazi Germany and in Antarctica. I mean, they wouldn't need a 20 and back, or maybe they did. Maybe they piggybacked on it, but I assume that they didn't need it to begin with, but the US did because it was all being done secretly.
Yeah, the Germans were exploiting that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Fleet was using 20 and back as well.
Okay, so how would the Dark Fleet have been doing it, or the Germans? Were they kind of like doing it 20 and back with their own citizens, or like after agreements were reached with the US, they were taking a lot of US citizens, making them work in the Dark Fleet for 20 years and then putting them back, or military people?
Well, in the beginning, the Germans were using it on a much smaller scale than what the Americans were doing. They weren't using it in earnest until like around the same time that Solar Warden was.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Fleet was kind of working all around us and kind of given free reign, and they were still pulling assets from Earth. They were working on the Lunar Operation Command at times. They were integrated into everything, so they were getting assets to and from the Dark Fleet using the 20 and back as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I thought it was really interesting that Professor Eshed kind of identified Mars as the place for this joint US extraterrestrial base. So is that kind of like referring to, say, a base that's run by the deep state, so run by, say, whether we're talking about the Dark Fleet, or we're talking about interplanetary corporate conglomerate, that they are kind of like taking Americans up there and they're kind of like using them to, I don't know, prepare them for kind of deep space operations or doing kind of research and development?
Yeah, you have corporate bases, almost all of them interplanetary corporate conglomerate bases. There are some that are just Dark Fleet,
Mm-hmm.
but the ones that he's discussing are bases that are built and controlled by ETs, and they have given us access to the facilities, and we go and work there alongside them.
Okay, all right. So when we're talking about a place like Mars, we're talking about bases that are either controlled by the Dark Fleet, the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, or extraterrestrials, and Americans are kind of like taken there for different things. But we're not talking about any bases on Mars that at the moment come under the jurisdiction or sovereignty of, say, the American government.
There could be small little bases that have been built, especially since I was involved, that are related to the programs that ended up aggregating into Space Force, some of the military industrial complex ones. But those typically are smaller, more modular sort of bases that are more in line with what we're used to seeing depicted, like, in the 60s and 70s and NASA art, more of those types of bases. And the larger bases that are just completely built out, like cities, are usually going to be, interplanetary corporate conglomerate, and a lot of the bases, that even, the military groups use, they are kind of staffed out, built out and staffed by the corporate groups anyway. So there could be a military base that you would consider, just for, let's say, the Solar Warden group. Well, that base was most likely built by interplanetary corporate conglomerate assets, and most likely there's at least some management going on inside that base that involves interplanetary corporate conglomerate, even though it's officially a Solar Warden base. They're all just kind of the tentacles go everywhere with.
Okay, so what do you think, Professor Eshed kind of like mentioned Mars having these joint bases? Does that mean that we're going to start to learn very soon about what's really going on in Mars, that they have these kind of, there's multiple things going on over there? I mean, I guess that's going to blow people's minds when, especially the mainstream, when they start learning that, there are these secret bases up there already that are running. I mean, people like Elon Musk are talking about sending up their Starship, taking 3 months to get to Mars, using methane rockets to kind of like, take people over there. He's talking about 2024, maybe the first one going. But, does that all now just become kind of like moot because Eshed's revealed that there are bases already there and American astronauts are already there. So they're obviously getting there. They're not using methane rockets to get there. They're using anti-gravity craft. So does this kind of like mean that, what Musk is doing and kind of Mars exploration, that all of that's going to be kind of like just maybe supercharged as the information comes out that this advanced tech exists?
What I think is that for years to come, we will still be building out this more conventional space technology because there's going to be a gap. They'll let us know. I mean, they let us know about the stealth bomber, but how many of you have flown in one? We found out about that in the 1980s. So just because technology is disclosed to us doesn't mean that you or I are going to be flying around in it. And if we want access to space and access to certain areas of space, civilians are going to have to still keep building out, this technology until it is opened up. It's not going to be opened up immediately. But yeah, it's going to probably be pretty frustrating for, I think it would kind of wipe out a trip to Mars in a conventional rocket if they do announce, hey, we're already there. We already have colonies there, and we can get back and forth, very quickly. Why invest, in a trip there? So I think it would take the wind out of their sails.
Right. Imagine someone like Elon Musk, that maybe he would have been very dismissive of this whole secret space program genre, that all of a sudden he comes across this Israeli scientist working or having worked at this top Israeli Space Institute, who is talking about this stuff and secret bases. I mean, mustn't someone like Musk shift from that position while all this is just BS conspiracy theory to, holy cow, it's real, that this secret space program stuff does have legs to it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's becoming more and more apparent that there is a secret space program. It's becoming more and more apparent that extraterrestrials exist, and it's just below the surface now in the mainstream. Hopefully, with more announcements like this and work that we're doing, we will be able to bring it out into the mainstream. I'm working on doing that on a number of different levels. And the work that we've been doing is going to be seen as very important, I believe, in the next few years.
Right. So, I mean, what do you think of the likelihood that someone like Elon Musk can kind of like do a quick turnaround, rather than because I mean, he's built up his SpaceX industry, and they're now doing rocket launches for NASA and for the for Space Force and for the NRO that Musk is doing this now. That as he kind of learns more about this, do you think he at some point will be briefed? Because I imagine when he does receive an official briefing, that he'll say, well, why am I going to waste my time with methane or kerosene rockets when there's this anti-gravity stuff? And, with the Tesla car, he's already been a pioneer in shifting us from fossil fuels to electric cars. So couldn't he do the same thing with rockets?
Yeah, and I believe that he's working so closely with NASA now. Once Space Force announces certain technologies, that's going to slide right over to NASA, and NASA is immediately going to start using these technologies. And NASA is going to use civilian contractors still to do these new technologies. So Elon Musk could very well already be prepared to make that shift, as far as we know. From what I've been told, there are people that have worked around his organization that know quite a bit, and how much they're sharing with him, I don't know, but he at least has access to people that could give him, this information.
I know he's working very closely with Space Force. I mean, he's given talks with them, and he's sending up satellites for Space Force. But I know the Secretary of the Air Force, Barbara Barrett, has actually gone on the record to say that the Air Force needs to declassify a lot more technology. So, some of the anti-gravity stuff could be slated for release soon. I know that Space Force is in this kind of 18-month setup period. It ends in May of 2021, that they're officially set up. And so they're ready to go from then. Right now, they're still consolidating and getting everything sorted out. But by May 2021, I anticipate that they're probably going to start getting briefings or start getting the technologies that Lockheed, Skunk Works, and kind of like Phantom Works, Boeing, and whatever Northrop is building, that they're going to start getting briefings on this advanced technology that has been secretly built. And Space Force is going to say, yeah, we want some of those, and we're going to deploy them, and then then things starts to open up, and maybe that's why 2024 was set by President Trump as the target date for the return to the moon, because he anticipated, or maybe his administration or people within it were planning to release this tech before then, so that we have manned missions to the moon again by 2024. Because it wasn't going to happen with the Constellation rocket, that's for sure, because that's a white elephant. So, like, people are asking, how could America get back to the moon by 2024?
Yeah, using existing technology that's secret.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that in the next 4 years, from what I was told about Space Force, was yes, they were going to start unrolling, releasing these technologies. It was going to be done very similarly to how the stealth planes were done. We're going to, around air bases, people are going to see white orbs that disappear, and then a triangle is there, or another type of craft, and then they'll see it descending down into an air base in Germany or somewhere else. People will get some video and pictures of it. It'll be on the internet for a while. People will talk about, oh, I saw an orb and I saw a triangle, at this location. And then it'll start coming more and more into the consciousness. And then, just like they did with, the stealth bomber and fighter, you'll see one flying in plain view. It'll be on the news. They'll talk about this new wonderful technology and how it just makes sense, if you think about it, how this technology works. And it's just amazing that it wasn't, it hadn't come out before. It's going to be, really, done in a real exciting kind of way, I've been told. But it was going to be done, kind of slowly, going over the next 4 years into if, Trump had a next administration.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of shifting tracks, back to this kind of like reorganized super federation that's going to take charge of Earth affairs. What do you know is going to happen from the perspective of like the ETs or the Galactic Federation or this super federation or what was a super federation looking at us now? I mean, who's kind of like liaising with the ETs now? Who's doing the talks, and where are we heading?
It's still all of the same people. Deep state people are still in contact with ET groups. The ETs will work with whoever's in control, and and try to work to get other people in control. But these same negative ET groups that we would call like the reptilians are still down here interacting with the deep state. They're obviously losing more and more power, or people are waking up to their power more and more every day. But we also still have Nordic groups, Anshar type groups, different types of ETs that are coming in, trying to assist us in a positive way. And then we also have many other ET groups that just want us to get our act together so they can engage with commerce and exchange of culture, because it's pretty open out there, and we're in a little bubble right now, and there are a lot of these civilizations that would like to interact with us and get to know us better.
Well, one of the things that President Trump did recently was he sacked 11 members of the Defense Policy Board, and that included people like Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, Gary Roughead, the former Chief of Naval Operations. So it looked like he was trying to change something pretty major that had a lot of influence behind the scenes. And I know Henry Kissinger, as far as I can tell, I mean, he's been involved in the whole kind of deep state, extraterrestrial, global management system for decades now. So by Trump sacking these people, I mean, is he really trying to shake things up, like maybe open up negotiations with more positive extraterrestrial groups saying, hey, these reptilians or these negative groups, they don't have as much power as they once did. So, come to me and let's make some deal.
There could be that aspect to it because of some of the people like Henry Kissinger, who we know are directly involved with the reptilians and other groups. The briefings I had received was that this was more about taking away what they call deep state control of the Department of Defense and certain special forces groups that were being misused by this think tank, or however you want to describe it, and that they moved the control of special forces back over directly to the Secretary of Defense. I think it had to do more with also getting in a position to where the DoD wasn't going to block some of the efforts he may take as next steps if he doesn't win in the Supreme Court with the election stuff, which I really don't want to get into on this video too much.
Yes.
I think it had more to do with that scenario.
Okay. So overall then, with this development with Professor Eshed, I know it's going to really have a big impact on working professionals who are now going to take a second look at all of this literature. So I think it's going to kind of like increase demand for people like yourself, myself, who have been doing this kind of research and disclosure. So, what do you think lies ahead?
Well, I think that, I think that what you said times 1,000 when it comes to this information is going to be, the public is going to be hungry for it. We have more and more of this information coming out. We have just people in their everyday life that are seeing things that don't make sense that are going on in the world, and that certain conspiracies, there is a little bit of merit. So they're starting to look at these so-called conspiracy theories, a conspiracy theory about aliens genetically manipulating the planet. Come on, that for the mainstream, that's crazy. But now look at the information's out there. So yeah, like I said, I think our information right now in Hollywood, these topics are extremely popular, esoteric, in general. There are many other ways, like, I think when this information comes out, your books, how many do you have? 5 now, or is it more on the secret space program?
5 on the secret space program series.
Though
Another one kind of in the pipeline.
Yeah, and those books may become required reading in universities, or at least quoted from heavily at some point, and people will start searching these terms, keywords, and more people are going to start coming to our work. And I already see it. I'm seeing subscribers growing, more emails coming in from people that have seen me on like Jenny McCarthy or somewhere else more mainstream and not niche.
Mm-hmm.
So interest is growing, and I think that the information that we've been putting out there is going to be some of the most popular information, around, here within a few years.
Right. Yeah. I'm enjoying it at the moment. In terms of just connecting all the dots, all of these secret space programs, revelations that you've been doing, and others have been kind of like revealing for a few years now, and now with these kind of like official acknowledgements and a lot of the documentation that's coming out, I think that's just going to be really exciting for anyone that's trying to put together the big puzzles. So yeah, and that for me has always been interesting. Is like, what is the big picture? How do all of the pieces of the puzzle fit together? And now we're able to fit together the pieces of the puzzle a lot more. So I'm doing that now with my next book, which is focusing on Space Force. I'm just going to do a whole book on Space Force, how it was set up, and why it's threatening the deep state, and how it connects to kind of like Starfleet, because that's one of the things that I think, or Roddenberry's vision of a Star Trek future, because you've talked about that too a few times. The military wants the Star Trek future. So I was kind of like really amazed to see that in 2019 there was something called the Space Futures Workshop that was organized by Air Force Space Command, and that's the predecessor to Space Force. And I was really amazed to see that they came up with 8 scenarios, and their preferred scenario was the Star Trek future. And I thought that was really interesting. That why would they choose that?
Look at the symbol they chose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was before Space Force was set up, that they actually, its predecessor was saying that their preferred option for the future was a Star Trek future. And then you have Space Force set up, you have the logos, and all of the connections with Star Trek as it was envisaged. To me, it's almost like back in the past, in the 50s and 60s, someone used time travel technologies and saw, okay, in the future we're going to have something called Starfleet. So let's start seeding the mass consciousness with that. And Roddenberry was briefed, and I talked about that in the Navy Secret Space Program book, that Roddenberry was briefed.
Let me blow your mind even more. The space, the 20 and backs, all of the temporal travel that's going on, you have to visualize it this way. Let's say, this is just picking dates out of the air. Let's say in 2036, Space Force develops the technology to travel back in time. Well, they're traveling back in time and working with people back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, pulling them up into 20 and backs, working with them in these temporal groups. So that information, like the people going up and working in these 20 and backs and working off planet for Space Force, that's actually in the future, this is going into their consciousness. So it's, it kind of bleeds out in different ways. So I think that there's a huge temporal part of this puzzle that a lot of people really aren't paying enough attention to. And when all of this does come out, it's going to blow even the minds of people in ufology that have been covering. I know about 58 different ET groups. I know, about spacecraft that can fly from between here and the moon in a matter of minutes, and they think they've got a good understanding. But when all of it does come out, the temporal aspect of it is going to be the mind-blowing part.
Right. So this pulling people out of like historical epochs, the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and pushing them into this kind of like 20-year and back program, that whatever else in the 2030s, 2040s, whatever. And after 20 years, they get pushed back. Well, that raises the question, could Gene Roddenberry have been a 20 and back in the Starfleet of the future?
Yeah, that's my question too.
Okay, well, that's an interesting one.
Influenced by someone who was.
Well, I know he was actually directly influenced by Leslie Stevens, who was the director of, I think it was The Outer Limits. The Outer Limits was run by Leslie Stevens, and he ran that from 64 to 66, I think was the last season. And Gene Roddenberry sat in on the second season of The Outer Limits. Now, in the Navy Secret Space Program book, I actually talk about Leslie Stevens' father, who was the vice admiral. He was the guy that worked directly with Rick Orboda in setting up the Navy Secret Space Program. So the son of Admiral Stevens was the guy that inspired or introduced Gene Roddenberry to a lot of these ideas. So it's quite possible that maybe Leslie Stevens was one of these people pulled out and served in the 20 back program, because Leslie Stevens didn't just influence Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek. He also influenced Glenn Larson, who came up with the Battlestar Galactica series originally in the 70s.
Wow.
So this guy, Leslie Stevens.
Yeah, Battlestar Galactica also, plays into the whole AI threat.
Exactly. So that would make sense that Leslie Stevens was probably part of the 20 and back program, because his father was, working for the Navy, a vice admiral. His father was actually head of a joint intelligence organization set up by the Pentagon. So Leslie Stevens, the vice admiral, was in charge of that. So if there was a 20 and back program, and that people in the US military back in the 40s and 50s were aware of that and saying, okay, you can take this guy or that guy, that maybe they said, okay, take my son, Leslie Stevens, put him back and put him in the 20 and back program in the future. And then Leslie Stevens does the soft disclosure. Because, The Outer Limits, if you look at the episodes of that, I think it ran for 2 seasons, but there's a lot of episodes in there talking about the different advanced technologies that were being used. Like there's one episode called OBIT, Outer Band Individuation Teletracer, which is all about tracking people at any time through their resonant frequencies and find out what they're doing. So this is an Outer Limits episode. So this is advanced tech that was being developed at the time. So Leslie Stevens was kind of like seeding the mass consciousness with these advanced technologies, getting Roddenberry, inspiring Roddenberry to do something on a kind of like a galactic confederation on planets in the future, Starfleet, then Glenn Larson and Battlestar Galactica. So yeah, I would say this was probably how it was done.
You make an interesting argument.
Yeah, wow. So what can we expect from you in the future?
Well, let's see. I've got a lot of things going on. Graphic novel is finally on track to finish. It's turning out very amazing. It's going to go in pre-sale again here very soon. You can get it at disclosurecomics.com. Get on the mailing list. It'll go live very soon. And I do believe that this graphic novel is going to be a major collector's item, especially the pre-release edition, because we're taking this as a storyboard into Hollywood. we have interest here and there on, bringing this, to a movie or a series. We're definitely not going to have a problem getting a docu-series of some sort going on a channel somewhere that will be seen by many, many millions more people, which will bring people more to our community. So we have that going down. My online course, The Blue Avians and the Law of One, it's going to start on January 9th. You can find all of this at ascensionworks.tv, and you can also find my old course there. And we're hopefully next year, Ascension Works TV is going to launch. It's going. I'm working with Mike Wiskowski quite a bit on it. We're hoping to make it a new sort of social media platform, as well as a place to come and watch videos like, a Netflix or something like that. We have a lot of people interested in doing shows for us. So, it looks very good there. So I think those are the number one things that are, happening with me. And I was gonna, maybe some of the people that are watching this video are, and maybe because of this viral story going around, it kind of sucked somebody new into this video, and they hear us talking about, you wrote 5 books on the secret space program. Where can they find out more information about those?
Okay, well, they can go to my website, exopolitics.org, or they can go to Amazon, just type in my name, or just type in secret space programs. It comes up. So it's, there is a secret space program series on Amazon that they can kind of learn about. So yeah, just coming to the website, and I'm working on this, on volume 6 in the series, and that's tentatively titled Space Force and the Rise of Starfleet. So I'm very excited that I'm getting close to finishing the first draft of that. So it'll be ready sometime around March and April of next year. And I'm going to be doing something with John D'Souza and Laura Eisenhower with Portal to Ascension in early in January. I think it's the first Saturday in January or something. I don't have the date right in front of you, but we're going to be doing a kind of second Exopolitics and Ascension online webinar. So that'll be something where, hopefully there's more clarity about what's going on at the moment. But definitely everything is pretty exciting, and I'm going to be doing more webinars in starting at the end of January and go right throughout 2021.
Very cool. Yeah, the webinars are a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun, and the community seems to love them. Yeah,
I love that you can go really deep into an issue and not get so caught up in time management. It's like you have enough time to really kind of like look at all of the facets of an issue.
Yeah. Well, before we wind this down, I wanted to ask you, have you been paying attention to all of the weird monoliths popping up everywhere?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. That someone seems to be kind of like, I think it was an artist, because someone from the Leak Project went out there and took a look at one of these monoliths, and they saw rivets and all of that. So it was definitely a human artist that had put it together. So maybe it's just an artist kind of like trying to attract people's attention, but like archetypally, whether it's just a human artist, I think it is just a human artist. I think it's still archetypally, it helps waken people up.
It does help waken people up. It does, but I just had the feeling from the beginning that it was some sort of like mass marketing gimmick campaign kind of thing. But they started popping up in different countries and different states. There's been a number of them now. So I don't know, it's coordinated in some way, but it'll be interesting to see why they're doing this. But it's definitely piquing a lot of curiosity.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, I think that covers everything that, we wanted to discuss. It was pretty exciting when, this group of news articles came out, discussing this Galactic Federation and joint human ET bases on Mars. It was very exciting for us, especially because we've been talking about it for years. And we're starting to see more and more come out publicly from both of our information. And I think it's gratifying, but at the same time, we're looking for more, right?
Exactly, but it certainly is nice to have that kind of like official acknowledgement. And I know in your case, you've been getting a lot of flack. There's a lot of you have a lot of people out there trying to shoot you down, but I think that's probably because you're kind of like right over target, and your testimony is now is going to get a lot more attention. So I'm very glad to be working with you and putting all this information out.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The Alliance has been talking to me lately about after all of these events occur and it's time to start educating the populace. They've spoken to me about being involved in media, releasing media that would discuss the history of humanity. And I look forward to being involved in that someday. And I know you and others in this community will be involved as well. I really appreciate all the work that you've been doing over the last 5 years. You've been a very pragmatic person, not an emotional person. You've been a good, loyal friend, and you're doing really great work when it comes to the secret space program and introducing this topic to people. You were a professor. You're releasing this information in a non-sensational way, and I think what you're doing is really important. And I just wanted to say I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Corey. I'm looking forward to what the future brings to both of us.
It's going to be exciting. Okay, so thank everyone for joining us here on the Sphere Being Alliance channel. Please click the like button right now and subscribe. A lot more videos will be coming out here in the near future. I'm talking to someone about the financial reset and some of the Gezra, I guess you call it, stuff going on in Asia. Mass quantities of gold, a new financial system that rumors been going on for years. I've been speaking for the last year with some people that are involved on a high level, and I think we're about ready to do a video with them. I've been invited to go to Indonesia and the UAE, to videotape certain things that they claim exist, and I'm fingers crossed that it's legitimate, but time will tell. So please subscribe immediately, and I look forward to bringing more content to you in the near future. Thank you.
The thing is, we're not alone. We never really have been.
My gosh. We're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Come on, big man.
And this reality isn't what we think it is. These beings want us to know that our existence is much more than these physical bodies. That we are all one with everything. And what we do to each other, we do to ourselves. Our planet is moving into a part of space that is exposing us to much higher frequencies of galactic energy. This is causing the severe weather changes we are seeing. Increased earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and end-time madness. It's only going to get worse. Eventually, this galactic energy will lead to a pole-shifting solar flash, which will be a real wake-up call for humanity. Ultimately, this will be a good thing for us, but it's not going to feel like it at the time. We can have a more positive experience if we can raise our vibration quickly enough to match that of our planet moving through this high vibratory field of space. And that is exactly what this class is all about. Kindness, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, selflessness, love, service to others. These are all the things that will raise our vibration. Thank you for watching the Sphere Being Alliance channel. Make sure you click on subscribe and smash the bell to make sure you're receiving all the new content from the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel.